Before a man can truly lead, provide, protect, or fulfill any role that society expects of him, he must first understand who he is. And this is where many men fall apart. Not because they lack strength, intelligence, or ambition, but because they've been given responsibility before they've been given identity. They've been told to be husbands before they know how to be men. Told to be fathers before they even know their own father. Told to lead before they've been taught how to follow. And that is the root of so much dysfunction in our homes, our relationships, and our society. A man without identity is a man trying to live with no foundation. He may build something that looks impressive. He might get a job, start a family, buy a house, but without identity, all of that stands on shaky ground. Because if he doesn't know who he is, how can he know what he's supposed to do? How can he treat others right if he doesn't even see himself clearly? A man who doesn't know his value would either become arrogant to cover his insecurity or passive because he doesn't believe he matters. Either extreme is dangerous, and both come from the same root problem: identity confusion. You see, we've been trained to think that manhood is about doing. What do you do for a living? How much do you make? How many women have you had? How strong are you? We reduce manhood to performance. But true manhood is not about performance. It's about presence. It's about knowing who you are, even when you're doing nothing, even when no one is watching. That's why we have so many men who are hyper-functioning, but emotionally broken. They've learned how to act like men, but they've never become men. They've learned how to survive, but they don't know how to live. Culture creates masks for men, not identity. It tells you how to act, not who to become. The problem is when the trend shifts, and it always does, the man built on that trend collapses because he was never standing on truth, only on imitation. A man who chases culture for his identity will always be running, always trying to catch up with the next wave, always try to measure up to someone else's definition of who he should be. That kind of man may gain attention, but he will lose himself in the process. You see, real manhood can't be defined by culture because culture didn't create manhood. Trends didn't invent masculinity. Ego didn't design the male spirit. You weren't put on this earth to become a copy of what's popular. You were created to fulfill a purpose that existed before any culture or trend was ever formed. If you let the world define you, you'll live in confusion. But if you return to the original design, you'll discover clarity. One of the biggest lies men are taught today is that showing emotion makes you weak, that you should be silent when you're hurting, that you should fake confidence even when you feel lost. But real strength isn't in hiding your heart, it's in mastering it. A man who is ruled by ego is actually a man ruled by fear. He's afraid of being seen, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of being judged, so he pretends. He hides behind success, he hides behind anger, he hides behind performance. But you can heal what you refuse to reveal, and you can become whole by pretending to be someone you're not. The ego is a dangerous teacher. It will always push you to prove something, to prove that you're enough, to prove that you matter, to prove that you're a real man. But here's the truth. You were never created to prove. You were created to live. And a man who lives with intention doesn't need validation from anyone else. He's steady because he knows who he is, not because others applaud him for it. Ego will push you into competition with other men, but purpose will align you with your calling. And there's a big difference between chasing applause and fulfilling your assignment. Culture will always shift. What's celebrated today will be forgotten tomorrow. If your manhood is rooted in trends, it will always be temporary. If your manhood is rooted in ego, it will always be fragile. But when your identity is rooted in truth, unconstraining, timeless truth, you become unshakable. You become a man who leads with substance, not style, with conviction, not convenience, with authenticity, not arrogance. So here's the challenge. Stop looking to culture to tell you what a man is. Stop letting ego trick you into performing your masculinity. Go deeper. Ask better questions. Don't just ask, what should I do? Ask, who am I really? Don't just ask, what makes me look strong? Ask, what makes me whole? Because in the end, Manhood is not about how loud you are. It's about how aligned you are with your purpose. Culture may appall for a moment, but only truth will sustain. The world has confused leadership with control. It tells men that if they're loud enough, forceful enough, dominant enough, then they are leaders. It teaches that manhood is about being in charge, about barking orders, flexing power, and demanding submission. But that's not leadership. That's insecurity disguised as authority. True leadership doesn't come from fear. It comes from vision. And a real man doesn't need to control people when he can clearly see where he's going. You see, control is about manipulation. It's rooted in fear. The fear of being disrespected, the fear of being questioned, the fear of being exposed. So the insecure man clings to control, thinking that if he can just keep everyone beneath him, he'll stay on top. But what he doesn't realize is that real leadership doesn't push people down, it pulls them up. It doesn't suppress, it inspires. It doesn't dominate, it guides. And when a man leads with vision, he doesn't have to shout to be followed. His direction speaks for him. A man with vision understands that leadership is a burden, not a badge. It's a responsibility to serve, to protect, to provide direction, not for the sake of status, but for the sake of purpose. And that vision isn't just about where he wants to go in life. It's about why he's here in the first place. It's a picture of the future that pulls him forward, keeps him focused, and gives him the strength to resist distraction. Without vision, a man becomes reactive instead of intentional. He makes decisions based on emotion, pressure, or pride. But a man with vision moves differently. He doesn't chase trends or respond to chaos. He sets the tone, builds a path, and walks with purpose. Too many men are trying to control others because they lack vision for themselves. They haven't discovered their mission, so they try to find meaning in power. But control will always crumble without clarity. You can intimidate people, but you can't inspire them without vision. You can make people obey you, but you never earn their trust unless they see that you're going somewhere worth following. That's why real leadership starts within. Before you can lead a woman, a family, a business, or a community, you must first lead yourself. And you can't lead yourself without vision. Vision gives a man direction. It helps him say no to what looks good so he can say yes to what is right. It keeps him disciplined when it's easier to be distracted. It grounds him when everything around him feels unstable. And the beautiful thing about vision is that it creates legacy. A man who leads with vision doesn't just think about today, he's building for tomorrow. He's not just focused on what he gets. He's focused on what he leaves behind. His leadership doesn't die when he does. Because vision has the power to outlive the man who carries it. Control fades. The louder you shout, the more people tune you out. But vision speaks without shouting. It's seen in your consistency. It's heard in your actions. It's felt in your integrity. It shows up in how you love, how you serve, how you live. And people will follow a man like that, not because they're forced to, but because they trust him. Because they see that he's not just building for himself, he's building something bigger. So if you want to be a real leader, stop chasing control and start seeking vision. Don't lead from your ego. Lead from your purpose. And when you find that vision, walk in it boldly. Because one of the greatest lies ever sold to men is the idea that submission is weakness. That to be a real man, you have to be in control of everything, answer to no one, and rely only on yourself. We've built a culture where men are praised for being independent, untouchable, and unteachable. But the truth is, no man becomes great by standing alone. No man reaches his full potential by rejecting authority. In fact, the strongest men, the most grounded, most trustworthy, most powerful men are the ones who understand the necessity of submitting to something greater than themselves. True manhood begins with alignment. A man who has no authority over him will eventually abuse the authority he has. Why? Because when you are the highest voice in your life, your decisions will always lean toward your desires, not your purpose. You'll start to measure right and wrong based on what's convenient instead of what's true. You'll choose comfort over character, pride over humility, pleasure over principle. That's why submission is not a loss of freedom, it's the foundation of it. It's not about being controlled, it's about being covered. When a man submits to a higher authority, whether that's God, divine truth, or a set of timeless principles, he gains clarity. He stops reacting to life and starts responding with wisdom. He stops being driven by impulse and starts being guided by conviction. Submission doesn't make him smaller, it makes him sharper. It gives him structure, direction, and accountability. And in a world that constantly pulls men in every direction, that kind of groundedness is priceless. A man who refuses to submit is a man who will eventually self-destruct. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen because he becomes his own God. He becomes the sole judge of his actions, the ruler of his world, and the final authority in every situation. That kind of pride is dangerous, not just to the man, but to everyone connected to him. You can't trust a man who only answers to himself. You can't build a future with someone who won't be corrected. You can't follow a man who refuses to be led. Submission is not about weakness. It takes incredible strength to say, I don't know it all. It takes courage to say, I need help. It takes humility to say, there's a higher standard I choose to live by. Weak men avoid submission because they think it strips them of power. But strong men embrace submission because they know it gives their power purpose. A man submitted to truth Be what's deeper, leads better, and lives with integrity, even when no one is watching. If you study the lives of truly great men, those who left legacy, who impacted lives, who built strong homes and strong communities, you'll find a common thread. They all bowed before something greater than themselves. They all had a code they wouldn't break, a line they wouldn't cross, a voice they answered to that wasn't their own. And that submission didn't make them less of a man. It made them more. It refined them. It anchored them. It gave them wisdom in moments of pressure and grace in moments of failure. So don't buy the lie that submission is a weakness to avoid. It's a strength to embrace. Because when a man submits to a higher authority, he becomes trustworthy. He becomes consistent. He becomes focused. And in a world full of noise, chaos, and confusion, that kind of man is rare. That kind of man is needed. That kind of man is true. One of the most dangerous things a man can do is confuse his performance with his purpose. We've been conditioned from an early age to believe that what we do is who we are. That our value comes from how well we perform, how hard we work, how much we achieve, and how strong we appear. So men spend their lives chasing approval, chasing applause, chasing the next accomplishment, all in the hope that it will finally make them feel like they matter. But here's the truth. Manhood is not measured by your performance. It's measured by your purpose. And until a man finds his purpose, he will keep performing but never feel fulfilled. Performance is exhausting. It forces a man to keep proving himself over and over again. He might achieve great things, but deep down he remains empty. Why? Because he's performing for identity rather than living from identity. He's working to be seen rather than working from a place of already being known. That kind of life builds pressure, not peace. And when a man ties his worth to his work, then the moment he fails or even slows down, he starts to feel like he's nothing. The purpose is different. Purpose anchors a man. It gives him a reason to rise, a reason to push through storms, a reason to keep going even when no one is clapping. Purpose isn't about proving, it's about becoming. It's not based on how things look on the outside. It's based on the truth of who a man is on the inside. Purpose gives pain a meaning. It turns mistakes into lessons. It turns failure into fuel. And the man who finds his purpose can no longer be manipulated by applause or destroyed by criticism. That's why we see so many high-performing men who are still broken inside. They've built careers, made money, gained influence, but they still feel like something is missing. They keep performing, hoping that the next success will fill the void. But the truth is, nothing external can satisfy an internal question. And that question is simple. Why am I here? Until that is answered, a man will always be busy but never fulfilled. Active but not effective. Productive but not purposeful. Purpose is what separates a man who's just working from a man who's building. It separates the one who's drifting from the one who's directed. Purpose tells a man what to say yes to and what to walk away from. It gives him boundaries. It gives him clarity. It helps him prioritize what really matters. Because when you know your purpose, you don't waste your time trying to be everything. You focus on becoming the man you were designed to be. And here's the beauty of it. When a man walks in his purpose, his performance starts to flow from it naturally. He no longer works to impress, he works to impact. He no longer speaks to be heard, he speaks to bring change. He no longer lives to compete, he lives to contribute. Purpose makes his actions meaningful because they're connected to something deeper, something eternal, something unshakable. So, if you're a man who feels like you're doing a lot but still feel lost, pause. Ask yourself the deeper question. What is the reason behind my motion? What is the assignment behind my ability? Because until you discover purpose, performance will keep you chasing shadows. But once you find purpose, everything shifts. Your identity becomes clearer. Your value becomes untouchable. Your steps become ordered. And you begin to live. Not just as a man who performs, but as a man who is finally walking in who he was always meant to be. In a world obsessed with visibility, platforms, and recognition, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that manhood is proven in the spotlight. That you become a man when others see you succeed, when people admire your strength, or when your name is respected. But real manhood isn't proven on the stage. It's proven in the shadows. It's not about who you are when the cameras are on. It's about who you are when no one's watching. So the man can't win in private. He'd eventually fall in public. What you do behind closed doors matters more than what you do in front of the crowd. Your character, your choices, your discipline, your values, they are not truly tested when everyone's applauding you. They're tested in silence. When no one's there to cheer you on, when no one's giving you credit, when you're faced with temptation, pressure, or isolation. That's where real manhood is forged. Not in applause, but in accountability. Not in praise, but in perseverance. Any man can impress from a distance, but it's the private life that builds or breaks the foundation. That's where integrity lives. That's where consistency is formed. That's where self-control is developed. A man who looks powerful in public but is falling apart in private is living on borrowed time, because you can only fake strength for so long. Eventually, who you are in secret will show up in what you produce in public. That's why private victories matter. The decision to walk away from what could destroy you. The discipline to wake up and build yourself when no one is pushing you. The humility to ask for help when your ego tells you to stay silent. These are the moments that shape a man. They are unseen by the world, but they're recorded in the soul. And when a man wins in private, he becomes the kind of man who can be trusted with more responsibility, more influence, more people depending on him. Because what he builds is rooted, not just decorated. We live in an age of image where people post their highlights and polish their profiles. But manhood isn't a highlight reel. It's not curated. It's cultivated. It's built day by day, decision by decision, in the places no one sees. And if you skip the private process, your public life will eventually collapse. Because fame can elevate you, but only character can sustain you. Recognition can open doors, but only integrity can keep them open. So here's the question every man must answer. Who am I when no one's watching? Am I the same man in the dark that I pretend to be in the light? Because if there's a gap between who you are in private and who you present in public, that gap will eventually become a fall. True manhood is when those two places match. When your private life validates your public image. When you don't need a stage to prove your strength, because it's already proven in your silence. A private place is where your convictions are tested, where your motives are revealed, where your faith is stretched. And that place is sacred because it prepares you for everything that's coming. A man who honors the private moments is a man who can handle public pressure. A man who is faithful when unseen will always be fruitful when seen. So don't rush the spotlight. Build in silence. Grow in secret. Win in private. Because that's where real manhood is proven. And when the time comes for your life to be seen, your foundation will be unshakable. Not because